Good day everyone, it is Caitlin. Today we are looking at some original 20th century diaper covers or soakers. So hello and welcome. This was supposed to be a video of me crocheting some diaper covers, and I got one of them because I was going to make two. I got one of them mostly done and my crochet hook broke, and I had to wait for it to come in, and it took forever. And then I was 2 days before this video was due to be uploaded, so I was like, okay, well, I'm not getting them done. I don't want to stress myself out. So I have a bunch of originals here that could technically be used still, because they're only like 50, 60, 70 years old. They're not like 200 years old, and they're very sturdy if need be. Now I would of course rather make my own, so we'll be doing the crochet video later. Probably next year. I think I have it scheduled, but I don't remember when I have it scheduled. So we're just going to look at some originals today, and these are all knitted. So the pattern I found was for crochet, and I might do some knitting and some crochet. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're all made completely differently. So there's lots and lots of options. These are all wool, and they are all knitted. The patterns I've seen both knitted patterns and crochet patterns. I do actually have one more. I think it's more like this one. This is one of the earlier ones. So this is probably 19 teens. It came with that original 19 teens sack that we created. It's from the same place. So, and they're kind of together. So I'm assuming that that's about that time period, 19 teens, 1920s, somewhere in there. And these, I believe, are later, probably 40s and 50s. So yeah, these are the diaper covers. I do have one more that's a little more similar to this, but it's not going to come in time for this video, so we're just going to go without it. And we'll just have the 5, which I think is plenty to look over. But this is the first one. It is lovely wool, very thin wool. I would call it a fingering weight yarn. Very, very similar to Knit Picks palette wool in terms of how soft it is and the size of the yarn itself. And it's most similar to the crochet patterns that I have seen in the terms that it has this ribbed pattern on the top with a space to put a separate ribbon. And then from there, it's really just garter stitched, and you decrease on one end every row, and it kind of comes to a point. So what you create is actually a triangle, and then you go back up and you sew the point of the triangle into the diaper cover itself. And you sew it a little bit over halfway down, but you leave these little leg holes, and that way you can get the child in and out of it. Now this one does have some interesting marks on the corners of the legs, and I do believe that's where a diaper pin or a safety pin was put. I think the baby's legs were smaller than the holes, and to keep anything from leaking, the mom pinned it shut. The ribbon is a silk ribbon and matches the cream color of the diaper cover. Most of the diaper covers I've seen have been cream colored, except I do have one that is pink. But overall, it's a very fine, simple example. The next one we're going to look at is the smallest of all 5. This one is also about a fingering weight yarn. And it's made very much the same way, except that it's much shorter. And it also has a crocheted chain drawstring as opposed to the silk ribbon drawstring. And the yarn itself is a little bit softer than the first one, which is hard to tell on video, but it is the same cream color. It has that lovely ribbed effect, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl for 9 rows. And then it is, instead of a garter stitch, it's the stockinette stitch. So you see just the knit stitches on the front, and then there's a purl ones on the back. And it's the same thing. You decrease at the end of every row, and then you stitch part of it together to create little leg holes. But you can see how much more of a rectangular shaped this one is, as opposed to the first one, which is very square. This next one is much bigger than the other ones, but it's still made from a very light fingering weight yarn. It's also very soft. It's a little bit more white than the other 2 we've seen so far, but it's still a cream ivory color. And it still has that rib effect at the very top with a 2 knit, 2 purl. So this one has 20 rows before it gets to the garter stitch portion of the diaper cover. Also, its cord is a nice little knitted cord that is knitted in the round to create basically a very simple cord. Now when it reaches the bottom of the diaper cover, it goes back into the stockinette stitch, except that it knits it with these lovely little leg holes. So they're not completely knitted in the round, whereas before it was knitted in the round. So they made two separate little knit parts that connected, but they left the lovely little holes for the legs to come through. And this one you can see is a much bigger example of a diaper cover. Next one is the lovely little pink one. It's adorable. This one still actually has its tag. It's distributed by Marcel Knitwear Mills in New York City. And it's a fancier knit pattern of all the diaper covers that I have. It also features a drawstring of the knitted in the round cord. And it again has that 2 knit 2 purls at the top. And so this one has 15. Now this one has a very interesting pattern that they've created with various knit and purl stitches, except the sides are a garter stitch, which is very interesting. That the front and the back have a very lovely pattern to them. And they did not create that triangle shape with this one. Much like the first one, they just knit in the round until they got to the bottom, and then they cast off and used a serger to serge in the bottoms. They also used a crochet hook to create somewhat of a slip stitch around the leg holes, and I believe that's just to strengthen the leg holes to give it a little bit more strength and body to hold up to wear. But it is this lovely little pink color. And the final one we're going to talk about today is the most coarsely made one. It is more of a sport weight wool yarn. It is also a cream or ivory colored. It has its little crochet cord that is just made with a chain stitch. It's 2 knit, 2 purl. At the top are just a few rows, 7 to be exact. And that's where they created the holes right after the 7 before continuing in a 1 knit, 1 purl, 1 knit for the remainder of the diaper cover. And they did basically the same thing as the first one, which is to decrease at the end of every row so that you end up with a little triangle shape that you end up sewing together to create these little leg holes and this diaper shaped garment. You can see this was much coarser than the other ones. This one also I believe was used. I know the pink one was not, still has this tag on. I do believe the oldest one was used just because of the stains, especially from a pen. I don't know if the other 2 cream ones were used. This one I do believe was used because, especially around the crotch, it's very felted, so it looks like someone was walking, little child was walking or crawling and creating a lot of friction in that crotch area, the wool just a little bit. And give us this nice soft felted wool at the bottom. But you can see at the top it's not felted at all, but there is that fuzziness of felting at the very crotch. So I do believe it was used and worn. Alright, now I want to show you what I've been working on, which is in gray, because I didn't have any cream. Although for my knit ones, I am going to buy some cream, just because most of the ones I have are in that color. I just didn't have any when I need to start this project, so I chose gray, which is the closest thing I had to white. And this is the crochet diaper cover that you can see it's mostly done at this point. And I'm just crocheting it, just row after row, just decreasing at the end of every row until I get a tiny little point. Then I'll fold that over and do its little diaper cover shape. So it'll be more akin to the size of this one when it's done. And they did the little holes and all that, so I can put a little cord running through, which I'm going to copy this one and do the crochet cord through, because that's going to be the easiest thing to do very fast. And I chose crochet because I am a faster crocheter than I am a knitter. I can do both just fine. I am a faster crocheter, but also crochet uses more yarn per square inch than knit does, making knit more economical because you use less yarn, but making crochet very dense, and so for a diaper cover, it would hold more liquid. So pros and cons to both, but I chose crochet because it's fast, and also I would get more yarn per stitch, therefore making it denser and making it work better. That's not to say that knit wouldn't work. It does clearly. Plenty of people use knit, but it would work a little bit better. So I chose crochet. It looks like this so far. And you can see that triangular shape that will just continue getting smaller before I flip it up and sew it in, which I will just do with a slip stitch. So we will go over how I did these, and we'll also make some knit ones next year. I will link the pattern that I used below in case anyone's interested in doing it. It's a very simple pattern. I mean, you can see this beautiful little stitch. It's just created by a single crochet and a double crochet, a single crochet and a double crochet, a single crochet and double crochet, and on the next row you double crochet in the single crochet and you single crochet in the double crochet. So it creates this little knotted effect, which is very pretty. And it looks very similar to the pink one, at least in terms of the design. But when I talk about Knit Picks fingering weight, palette yarn, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I use. And you can see it is very similar to the weight of yarn used in this one. This is a very similar weight yarn. This one's very similar, it's a little bit smaller. This one is basically the same weight. These two are a little bit smaller of a weight, and this one is much larger. But I chose the happy medium, and I have tons and tons and tons of this. So I also know I do have white somewhere. I just don't know where it is right now, but I would also use that for diaper covers too. So depending on what I find, and if I end up making another order, we'll determine whether we use white or cream for our knitted reproductions. And the knitted ones, I will probably just do this. So the crochet ones, all the patterns I have are from the 1930s and 1940s and later, so 1950s and 60s. The knitted ones seem to be a little bit earlier. I mean, they still have knit in the 40s and 50s, as evidenced by some of these later ones. This one I do believe is much earlier, and the earlier you go in time, the more common knitting is. So I do believe a lot of the 19-teens and 20s ones are knitted. All the ones I've seen dated to that time period have been knitted. So these are going to be my 1930s and 40s ones, whereas these are going to be the 19-teens and 20s diaper covers. So I am going to repeat this one exactly. I have a very similar, if not exact, one coming in which case I'll just compare them. But yes, so I'm going to make these for the 19-teens, 20s. The crochet ones are going to be the 1930s and 40s, although you can also do knit in that time period if you would prefer, as evidenced by most of these. Now just a little bit about diaper covers or soakers. I'm not seeing fabric ones in this time period like we did fabric ones for the 19th century. It seems like knit or crochet are going to be a lot more common in the 20th century as opposed to the fabric ones. I tried to find fabric ones, y'all, because I knew how simple that would be to make up. But all I found were the knitted and crocheted ones. And I think partially because you could buy them ready-made in the 20th century and machines did all the knitting and crocheting. So it was a no-brainer and they're fairly cheap. So why are you sitting there spending your time making your own? Whereas in the 19th century, you're a little bit more inclined to not have access to ready-made goods. And so you are making a lot of things at home, which makes sense that you would want to do it with fabric because that is a lot easier to make that up than it is to sit and knit and crochet for hours and hours and hours on end. So when I hand did the diaper covers, the soakers, pilchers, pilch, whatever you want to call them, for the 19th century, it took me an afternoon to hand sew. We made 4 of them, just an afternoon. I have spent weeks on this. Weeks, and it's not done. And I'm a lot faster at crocheting than knitting. Now, that's not saying I'm sitting here and actually doing this every day, or even for like an hour or 2 a day. I'm trying to get 1 or 2 rows done a day. And then as it gets smaller and smaller, I can do like 4 or 5 rows a day. So it's going faster now, but it took a very long time in the beginning because there's like 200 stitches in this thing to make a single row. It takes, it takes a little bit. And quite frankly, I just have so many other things to do. I have, a house to keep up. I have sewing for clients to do. I have sewing for videos to do. I didn't have time to work on this. And a woman in the 19th century wouldn't have necessarily had a lot of time to do this either. So fabric made a whole lot more sense. So trust me, when I looked into it, I tried to find fabric examples of soakers. They probably existed. There are probably some poor women who didn't have access or couldn't afford to buy them, who didn't have time to do their own, who probably did do the older style of fabric ones. I cannot find any evidence of that, so therefore I am not going to do that. I'm going to do what I can find evidence for, which are the knitted and crochet ones. Unfortunately, no one makes them anymore. Well, I think one place sells them still, but they're very expensive, so I'm not doing that. I will just make my own at that point, and it might take me quite a bit, but I will do it. And then I have all these other ones too that are still perfectly serviceable, and they're very sturdy. I wouldn't use this one because I'd be afraid of the silk ribbon fraying. if I did use it, I'd have to take the silk ribbon out, put in a modern one. But these are all perfectly serviceable with no problem. But I do want to make my own, so I'm not using originals. But for the purpose of trying to get everything ready so that I don't have to think about it because I'm still not, I'm not pregnant. We're just trying to plan to make sure everything gets done, because sewing for 3 different centuries with a 9-month time frame does not sound like fun to me. That sounds very stressful. So I'm doing all this ahead of time so I don't have to stress about it when I do get pregnant. But for the purpose of, if we had a 20th Century Day event and I didn't have time to do any of this, could I use these for a day? Yeah, I would. I probably wouldn't use this one, but I would use one of the ones that's very obviously worn already. I would not use the pink one just because it has the tag on it. I don't want that metal being our baby, but I also don't want to take this off because it's part of the history of it, and I'm not going to be the one to take this off. But would I use this? Yes. Would I use this one? Yeah. This one would not work for newborns. It's huge. This would encase an entire baby up to their shoulder. So probably not this one. But I wouldn't be opposed to using these if I needed to until I got mine done. I just don't want to use them long term because they are older and therefore, by definition, a little bit more fragile than, say, the modern stuff. Although they're not that much older than what I'm doing now. And they are made of wool, which is very sturdy and long-lasting. So yeah, they'll work fine, but I'm still going to make my own. Now, I do find it very interesting that the shape of pilchers has not changed since the 1920s. Since the 1820s, at least. I think it's the first time I had documented. No, I think there's an 18th century source that mentioned pilchers being a triangle or a square that you fold in half to make a triangle. So yeah, 300 years, the shape didn't change. They're still triangles. They're still triangles that we sew together. Just now that we're sewing them together as opposed to letting the excess fabric and just buttoning them up like we did in the 1830s ones. By the 1860s, I am seeing evidence of pilches being sewn up here, like this, sewn up like this. Even though they're still the fabric ones, they're figuring out, oh, we can just sew them, have little leg holes, it's fine. It still works just as well without all that extra loose space for waste to come out and create a bigger mess. So they're figuring that out, but the shape is still exactly the same. From the 18th century all the way up until we invent disposable diapers, pilches did not change much. They are still wool, and they're still triangular shaped. They got a little bit better in terms of the sewing together, not as much waist area, not as much loose area for waist to come out, but they're still basically the same. I guess if you have a good thing, you don't mess with it, right? Thank you so much for joining me today as we looked at some original 20th century soakers and looked at the one I'm creating myself. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.